Hi, welcome to the Domesticated Bear. Today we're going to talk about how to mend denim, specifically in the thigh and crotch area. You can call it what you want, chub rub, crotch blowout, but if you have thighs that touch, which is a lot of us, it's probably very likely that you've kind of worn through a pair of jeans right here in this kind of upper crotch, upper thigh area. I know I've been bowling through jeans since I was like 15, so this is something. It's really because I wear jeans day in and day out most of my life, so they do wear. And the frustrating thing is that they wear here first. Like I'm not blowing out the knees. I'm not getting holes in the pockets. I'm not roughing up the hem. It's here first. So I tend to patch them sometimes numerous times before the rest of the jeans are kind of aged enough to move on. So you can see this side, we do have a full kind of blow through right there. I try to catch it as early as possible. This other side actually has been mended before, so we can actually see how that's holding up, and that's great. We'll get some better shots, but we're going to talk about kind of the do's and don'ts of making a good patch in the first place, and then we'll actually go through on how to mend these, patch them back in place so they'll be wearable for a long time. So here's a better view of what we're working with. I've got one pair here that has a previous kind of mend. You can see here that's holding up pretty well. And then this side has now kind of sprung its own problem. So we'll actually be patching an area about this big to kind of make sure that it's totally reinforced, so that, you know, when I'm out in the world, nothing embarrassing is happening. Also here, I've got a pair that need to be kind of remended. You can see these have previous patches. These are a bit older, a little bit more worn, but the previous patch is holding up fine. But next to that, there's kind of weakened areas now. So we're gonna go back through and do a quick touch up on those, just so they're back to, we'll say, fighting shape, fighting condition. I'm gonna turn these inside out so you can see what the inside of this patch looks like. It's easier to understand. This is the pair of jeans that have like the full blowout on the one side and have been patched. And you can see the patch is considerably larger than the area that has the damage. And that's, there's kind of two parts to the patch. There's the actual exterior part and then the part where you're mending. If you just do this part and don't have the rest of it there, it's not gonna be very strong. You're trying to not just like fix the hole, but also reinforce the whole area. And this is a place that gets a lot of kind of stress and rubbing, right? So you can see it's not exactly a perfect right angle. It needs a little bit more space than that, but make sure you're shaping it to the actual crotch. If you've got both sides that need to be repaired, you actually want to make sure you do two separate pieces, because this seam has some shape in it. And if you try to do one piece that goes over the side, it's going to get it won't look right. So here I'm going to cut a new piece and put it in place. Something to think about on as far as materials go, you could use other fabrics. I tend to save. This is a cut off leg from another pair of jeans that got turned into shorts. They were no longer needed as long pants. They got turned into cutoffs. So whenever that happens, or if you just have a pair of jeans that have totally died, save those. You can always use them for patches. So I'm going to cut this open so I can get a nice piece of patch right here, get that pinned in place, and we'll start getting going. The other thing to think about is your thread color. The impulse for a lot of folks, I think, is going to be to try to match the color of the denim. It's really hard to do because it's not really navy. So I just tend to go with black. Black is easy. It kind of just goes away and doesn't draw any attention to itself. That's for dark rinse jeans. If you had a lighter rinse, I would encourage you to look in the scale of grays rather than trying to match the blue perfectly. It's going to be a very difficult match. So find a gray that's somewhere in the right color family, and it's going to kind of go away much more easily than trying to find the perfect indigo blue. Okay, for our patch, I've cut a piece that's considerably bigger than I need. I use kind of a quarter of a circle as my guide, knowing that I'm going to trim some of this down, make it make it larger than you need. I always place it. Make sure you've got your jeans, the section of them that you are actually working on, that should be placed as flat as possible. This part's going to be kind of rumpled up because that's the contour of the clothing, right? So place this here. This part of the triangle wants to kind of butt up to that crotch seam. And you can either go, when you're stitching right next to the crotch seam, or kind of onto it. Just know that this is going to be it's going to take your sewing machine some kind of muscle to get through that part, right? So I'm going to go from here. I've got my other kind of corner. I'm going to go next to the seam down there. Make sure that's flat. And see, there's extra here. That's fine. We're going to trim that away when we're done. So I'm going to pin in a couple spots And again, this has got to be flat. If it's not flat, you're going to be having some woodgy-wodgy, crunchy, bumpy bulkiness, and you do not want that in this part of your pants, right? So there's a few pins, and I'm using these big yellow-headed pins so you can see them on camera. Use whatever you're most comfortable with. And what we're going to do is first sew down the perimeter of this patch. And I like to use a stitch, I call it the serpentine stitch, that's what I was taught to call it, but you can see it's here, this kind of wavy stitch that has lots of small stitches along the way. Sometimes it's a little pointier, depends on the brand of your machine. If you don't have that particular stitch on your machine, you could use a zigzag, that would be fine. If you don't have a zigzag, if you're just on a straight stitch machine, that would work too. What this accomplishes is it keeps the edge a little bit flatter. We want this to all be flat and smooth, right? So I'm gonna go around kind of right next to these seams, close to the edge, leaving a little bit because this is going to fray out in the wash. You can see it happened over here before. That's fine. I'm not turning anything back because I don't want to introduce any extra bulk, but I'm going to kind of go around here, and back. And that's going to hold down the edges of the patch. It's going to kind of help rebuild the integrity of this part of the fabric, and we'll come back after that. All right, we're back and that's stitched. So you can see I went around with that kind of that serpentine zigzag, and you can see I've got quite a bit of extra fabric here. Also, one thing to note, I placed the right side of the fabric, the darker side that we're used to seeing on the outside of jeans, towards the outside. So if I had a larger, like a true hole here, not just like kind of a blow through, that color would be there to mask the hole as opposed to announcing it with this lighter color. So make sure I know I've done that the wrong way before, not really thinking it through. So I'm gonna trim away. I'm using pinky shears. You could use regular shears. It just maybe helps it fray a little bit less, but denim only frays to a point and then it kind of stops. So I'm trimming away a little bit of that extra. I'm going to leave this here. It's not hurting anybody. And it's still smooth and flat. You can see the patch is pretty flat. I'm going to turn these right side out. So here on the right side of the pants, you can see, even though I use black thread, this is matching pretty darn well. You can barely kind of see this shadow, and this is really in a part of, like, if these pants were on my body, you wouldn't be able to see this at all, really. So now that we've got this area totally reinforced, there's actually, you can see the fabric behind the hole now. That's great. We're gonna go through and actually stitch this down to the patch so it totally stabilizes that area so it doesn't get any worse. And you can see on this one that I've done before, I tend to kind of stabilize one direction and then go through and reinforce the other direction. And this is really just a series of kind of going forward, backing up, going forward, backing up in kind of dense. It's like a very dense kind of zigzag formation, and then the other way. If you go super, super dense, it's going to make the area kind of stiff, which can actually cause it to break down along the edges. So it's kind of a sweet spot. You don't want to get in there and overdo it. This one's probably a little overdone, I would say. But anything is better than having that hole there, right? So I'm going to go in and stitch back and forth first one direction, and then back and forth this direction to kind of nail that down so it's no longer an issue. So you can see here, the patch is kind of stitched closed. I've kind of stitched into the area that's more stable to make sure this whole area has not been stabilized. And now there's a kind of a good patch behind everything, so it should be reinforced, but if I get any more of those kind of rub-throughs, that I can quickly reattach that and kind of make it stabilized again, like I'm going to do with this other pair that has kind of blown through yet again. These would be on the trash pile by now if they weren't repaired. This is not a beautiful repair. This is a functional repair because it's jeans and it's kind of everyday wear, and really nobody can see this anyway unless I don't know, sitting in a very specific way. But mostly this is kind of always tucked kind of under my body if they're on me. So it's not a big deal. If you had like a pair of suit pants that had gotten a rip like this isn't how I'm going to go about doing that. This is a pretty basic functional repair. It's not gorgeous. Also, if you feel like, hey, I'd like to do that, or I have a pair of jeans I should do that too, but I don't know how to sew, or I'm not comfortable in my sewing machine, you could do this with any good dry cleaner that offers like basic alterations. They should be able to do a mend like this, no problem, probably even more beautiful than what I've done here. But again, this makes them functional and wearable for me again. So if you have any questions or comments or anything else you'd like to see, let me know down in the comments, and I hope this has been helpful.